All right. Interesting episode. The Back to Square One podcast is back. Maybe we'll do one episode a year. And you might also realize that one of the co-hosts, Mr. Kedric Kwan, shout outs, is not with us here today. However, I found a very suitable replacement in the form of Mr. Leonardo. For those who don't know Leo, he is one of Kedric's clients, and I am one of the associate coaches alongside Leo in Corpus Magna as well. So hopefully, Leo's performance today uh, might be a good replacement for Kedric, and maybe we'll have Kedric back in the podcast down the track. But today we actually are going to talk a little bit about, I guess, the topic of weightlifting and how it pertains, how it is potentially different to powerlifting. And of course, Leo here is actually really good friends with Chen here. And correct me if I'm wrong, Chen, you have worked actually with the China Olympic weightlifting team in the Olympics. Which year were those ones again?
I was joining the team since 2019, and then the Olympics was supposed to be in 2020, and we know that because of the pandemic,
Yeah.
so it just got postponed. So I worked with the team for like two and a half years.
Yeah.
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 Something like that.
That's
More
awesome.
than 2 years.
Yeah, it's cool. Well, maybe for those who don't know a little bit about Chen, could you maybe introduce yourself to some of our listeners? Yeah, and we can just kind of get the ball rolling from there.
Yeah, sure. So basically, I studied in New Zealand for my bachelor in sports degree, and then after that, I tried to combine the performance or like strength and conditioning and the rehabilitation. So I studied osteopath, and then I was like maybe physiotherapy. So then I translate to Australia, Perth. So that's where I met Leo. So in that gym. So I was actually studying physiotherapy when I was in Australia, and then yeah, due to some family issues, so I went back home. So I did actually finish my degree at Curtin. So but yeah, then there is, how do I say that? I just sometimes I think you got lucky, like when you are like passionate enough to something. So I got introduced to the team China, and then that's where the story begins.
Yeah,
And I
awesome.
actually, sorry, maybe so I actually did a lot of ongoing education. So I don't think we need to mention all the like certificates, but like I'm doing like a lot of stuff on top of the coaching and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Of course, it's been a while since I first met Chen, like recapping just now, like, we met at the Curtin Stadium. I just saw this 2 meter
Mm.
dude, he was doing such an elegant clean and jerk. I was like, wow, I got to talk to this dude. But yeah, fast forward, we're here now. Chen has coached the Chinese weightlifting team. And one of the reason why I believe this podcast would be interesting is simply because, like, how powerlifting and weightlifting, although different, is somewhat similar in the elements when it comes to strength training. And I believe even if like the strength programming itself, like the modality that is pretty straightforward, I believe that there's just different perspective towards how people actually approach certain things. Well, the programming is one of the thing, but the minute details could actually be the principles or maybe the ideology behind which a coach actually comply to or utilize to actually drive the process of, like, creating a training protocol to actually increase the success of their athletes. But yeah, Chen, I think it's quite interesting that you have like probably a unique experience not a lot of people get the chance to actually coach the Chinese weightlifting team. Maybe you can share with us a bit about, how were your experience when you were coaching them?
Yeah. So as I said before I met Leo, I've been training weightlifting for I don't know since 2015. So like 7 years now. So when I was back in Australia, I was like 2 or 3 years in. I had to travel to different cities when I was back in China. So I just had to find a local coach and to learn, pick up the stuff. So in the beginning, I was like with those juniors, so like very young athletes. I was training with them, and they had a way better technique than I did. And then so once I got a hang of it, and then I went overseas. I was studying and managing training at the same time, just trying to get as good as I can in terms of the movement. So and then so that passion just keep going on. And so when I got back to China, so there's an opportunity that they are hiring a performance coach. So that was basically what I've been doing as a job. So I was like, oh, if there is one job that's for me in this world, then this one is my dream job. This is the dream position. So everyone who likes strength and power training, knows that like Team China, like Chinese weightlifters had, maybe one of the most beautiful movements, beautiful snatch, beautiful clean and jerk techniques. That's something that always, attracted to me. So, I got the job. So the first time I walked into that stadium, so I saw those guys that, I've watched on YouTube. So that I used to watch them on the screen, and now they're just in front of my eyes. I was just like, oh, just
It's like
calm
meeting. It's
down,
like
calm down.
it's like meeting your idols, and then you get starstruck.
Yeah. I was like, just inside I was like, yeah. But like outside I was like, just be cool, just be cool. And then, but the whole atmosphere was quite how do I say that? Quite astounding. So I was shocked like how serious they treat training. So everyone was like before training they're like they just talk and easygoing, but when it comes to training, you have no idea how dedicated those guys are, and that's I guess the difference between like recreational lifters and the professional lifters. They probably the top athletes in the world in the sports. So no wonder they're so good. And if you thinking like how many years they've dedicated into this sport, and they can still treat every training session as serious as they did, it was just amazing. So and then like after a short period of like, okay, I'm just like in that sweet spot, and then I'm in this dream job position, and I realized that it's actually quite stressful, because like what you're gonna do if for any strength and conditioning coach, you'd be like, the first the first instinct is always, okay, I will just make those guys faster, stronger, right? But they're already fast and strong, and they probably is faster and stronger than any other athletes in the world in terms of the strength and power sports. Maybe not as strong as world class powerlifters, but like in terms of the strength, speed, okay, the power and the technique, the combination of those, the top level. So I was quite stressful, because I didn't know in the first place what to do to make them stronger, because their techniques just so beautiful. Like just I was just watching the lifting all day, every day, and when the time comes to my session, they'll be like, okay, now it's your time. Okay, you take them, and what's the problems you've seen, and what can you do to improve. I was like, they're actually pretty good. But that was for the first couple of weeks. And then I'll just keep asking myself, okay, I'm here not as a audience or not as a fan, but I'm here as a strength and conditioning coach. So I have to do something to make myself valuable. Okay, so I think this happens to every sport. So if you got into this professional sport, be it rugby or professional soccer, basketball, whatever. So if you're not doing anything that's helping the athlete, you're fired, in no time.
Yeah.
Right? That's the truth, right? So, and they're so good to be there, and as the support staff, you have to be as good, or at least as good, so you can support the athletes. So then, I think is in the whole process was like keep asking myself, challenging myself, or communicating with athletes and coaches. So learn from them first. I made a few mistakes that I actually learned from those mistakes, because in the beginning, I thought, okay, I've learned a lot of stuff. I know stuff. Okay, I can certainly, and I practice the sport myself. So there is certainly certain stuff that I can apply to those athletes. But when it comes to time that I think this is gonna be useful. And when I show them, in split second, they'll be doing much better than I do. That's how good they are. That's why they are the elite athlete, and we are just audience,
Humans.
or like humans. Yes, like it's like for me, they're just a bunch of Jedi's. They do different stuff, So.
Yeah.
But then I realized I had to view things differently. Okay, they are good, that's for sure. They're strong, that's for sure. But what about the injuries? What about the failed attempts? So okay, you see a lot of lifters, they have those training clips on the Instagram, on the YouTube. They can lift a certain amount of weight. But when it comes to competition, it's a completely different story. So, right? So how are we going to manage that? How are we going to optimize that? Because all the foundational work has been laid out. So they're already super, super strong. They don't need a strength coach, or at least they don't need me to teach them how to squat or clean and jerk, right? So, yeah, that's pretty much the first impression that I had when I was just joining the team.
I think you made a very interesting point there, and obviously I hang around on Instagram a lot as well. I think there's actually one really big difference, particularly with actually I think just Olympic weightlifting as a sport in general. I think one of the huge differences between that and obviously powerlifting, and Leo can obviously attest to this because I would say Leo is like a world-class lifter himself, is that it would seem that all the countries, especially like Olympic level with weightlifting, they train in a team environment. Like you said, they go to the stadium, everyone's there. I see the videos, everyone's got their clean and jerk box, like people are lined up. You've got the males, the females, the coaches in front. But for powerlifters, it's your coach will say, hey, here's a program, we'll check in. But for the most part, I'd say maybe not all, but I'd say most powerlifters, even elite level lifters, they will probably train in their own time, like in their own schedule. Maybe they have like training partners, but for the most part, they train alone, as opposed to world class. At least with the China weightlifting team, I think to an extent, maybe the Russians as well. It seems that they actually like, hey, Monday you come in, this time to this time we'll train, and then you go home, you eat, you come back, you train again. There's like a set schedule, and of course, we don't need to dive into the logistics of it, because obviously, with weightlifting, there's potentially more money there, whereas with powerlifting, it's still a growing sport. So most powerlifters, you would still need a side job, but I think most Olympic weightlifters actually just they just train, full-time athletes, like legit full-time. And I thought that was quite an interesting difference there. And you also brought up another really good point there, Chen, where like even for me, and sometimes I think I definitely feel this maybe more than Leo potentially, because I'm definitely, I wouldn't say like I'm world level, but I definitely do coach powerlifting as well. And literally the same thing as you, right? We go in there, we see these people doing crazy amounts of strength. You kind of like, you have this like imposter syndrome. It's like, man, like, can I really coach people who are like this strong? It's like, do I really have the ability and capacity to help? Because yeah, you're already so strong. Like, I can't even get to the 40% of what you do, and you guys kind of sit there. So, and obviously you did a successful job. I would think so, right? With how generally the Chinese weightlifting team has performed over the years, countless times. What were some of, I guess, your approaches? Because you talked about a few different ways that you help those athletes grow and become better. Like, what are some of your approaches, or how do you coach someone, especially a team, to world-class level? Like, yeah, like how would you help an athlete, I suppose? Because, you know, like you said, sometimes we get a little bit scared, but we know we have the tools to help. So what if you don't mind sharing some secret sauce, so that our listeners might be able to take away a thing or two?
Yeah. So basically, as I said, it's all like trial and error. So I've made mistakes and I learned from it. The most, if I had to say, one of the most, if not the most important component of the lesson that I learned is communication. So, okay, people would say, okay, this is bullshit. Like communication, like everyone can say that, but hey, when it comes to professional sports, communication is the number one
I agree.
factor or like component, because there is a saying, I forgot if it's come from Mike Boyle or someone. So it said they don't care how much you know unless they know how much you care. So this applies to the athletes. So if the athletes, they don't think you care them enough, they were like, okay, you are just here, you don't actually care about us, then they don't actually care about what you know or what you think is useful for them. So that's the initial. I think this applies to everyone, like even the clients. So you have to get the buy-in, right? So some of the clients maybe they're like, oh, you like your techniques is so good or you're so strong, and they immediately get that buy-in. So they come to you, so you don't need to do anything. But when it comes to like, like Chong said, either giving is like powerlifters or Olympic weightlifters, they're professionals, and they don't think, okay, I don't need some random guy just walk in and just tell me what I should do to get stronger or more healthier, right? So they just communicate with those athletes when they are not training, and before and after their training, and just let them know how you think. Like I was just watching their lifting and asking them questions actually, because obviously I had to learn the sport, because even though I've been training like that, but still they got much more insight than I had when I was first joining the team. And then I was with the head coach. So we had a really good team. So the head coach was being very supportive. So he and those athletes are being very supportive. They just accept who I was, and they gave me the room to make mistakes, and they told me what they need actually. So they told me what they need. They told me what they don't think is useful. So for example, I'll give an example. So some of the athletes, they don't like doing the mobility work before the training, right? It's when I was doing that, when I was first joining the team, I thought, okay, everyone should be doing this and that before like clean and jerk, or they'll do the other stuff, other mobility drills or warm ups before the snatch. That was like, okay, this is the format and this is the program, and we go in, we do that. But then you just like, they're not doing it. What if you have a client or athlete, they're just not doing it? What are you gonna do? So they're like, no, I don't have time for this, or I don't think I need this, or even if I do the same thing you told them to, they're like, no, it's, I don't feel different. It's just a waste of time. So I'm not saying my athlete said that, but I'm just saying I certainly had that situation, being that situation in various circumstances. So at that time I was like, what I do? So that's all I had. That's the program for today. If they're not doing this, what should I do as a backup? Then I realized I ignored they are like living human beings. They're not like computer programs. They're like, it's not like you enter like certain type of codes and they just go the same way every single day. It's not like that. Some days they're grumpy, some days they're happy, some days they feel better, some days they're not fully recovered. And maybe, like maybe the last training session has some kind of negative effect on them, or even like some other stuff outside of the training. You never know unless you talk to them, right? So that's the first or one of the most important parts. So communicate and just let them know, okay, give them options. Okay, if you don't feel like doing this, what about this? What about that? And you have to make them feel like, okay, this is, you're giving me the options and I have to try it out myself, because, to be honest, they're not giving me a hard time on purpose, because everyone's time is precious, because they only have like so much time for the Olympic Games, right? So everyone was like, if I don't care if you have like 30 or 40 drills as a warm up, if you give me one drill and that gets me fully prepared, I just want to have that one drill. So that's what I always said to the other coaches, like when I'm just delivering courses. I was like, everyone is like, there are so many courses nowadays, especially on the internet. So you have so many information, and like everyone is just trying to absorb as much as they can. But when it comes to apply it, you only just need one or two, but you have to know which one you're offering, right? So you only have, let's say, three of us. We are, we're having this job interview, and like you guys providing like 20 or 30 drills, but the athlete didn't like it. And I just give them one drill and they're like, okay, I feel good. Like I will be getting the job, So that's the other thing that I've learned, to just be effective and efficient and be accurate, if that's the right word. Be precise about your exercise selection, but that's all based on your understanding to certain individuals. So if I have four athletes, because like Olympic weightlifting is like individual sports, so you have to know them individually. So you maybe the program for each of them are different. So you're just not giving them the same thing. Okay, it's not like okay, we have a group session today. Yes, even if we have group session, we will have individualized program for each of them, because each of them will have their own issues to deal with. Some of them, they don't like doing the warm up. They don't like the mobility stuff. The others, they don't feel comfortable getting into the training session without adequate amount of mobility drills, right? So you have to understand and know those athletes so you can tailor your program according to their needs. And they will be like, they will cooperate more, and they will, benefit from those programs more, because if they feel like, they comfortable and they will be doing that, and they'll, even call it placebo or call it whatever, but it's just what it is, based on my experience. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, wow. Like that's a very valuable insight from yourself, obviously, Chen. And a bit of an oxymoron right here, but coaching is both simple and complex. Simple in a sense that you understand, your role as a coach is obviously to maximize how your athlete perform, their well-being, as well as how they sort of adapt to certain thing. But complex in a sense that there's just a lot of simple things, multiple layers that you have to understand and comprehend. And props to you actually. Like you are very flexible, yet somehow you adapt quickly to your environment. Because like although there's like more than one way to skin a cat, you might actually already know the theoretical underlying of what you're supposed to do as a coach. But then again, I do think it really takes one to be very observant, but yet humble to still, comprehend the fact that, there might be things that they don't understand. And I'm actually glad that you sort of like mentioned the fact that, everyone is different. You have to cater to them because like end of the day, you're giving service to human. But yeah, man, like it's really interesting to hear about that. So yeah, Chen, how you've experienced a lot of like coaching in general with like, well, the elite of the world, really. Like, could you please share one of your like success stories, with the athlete that you handled?
Yeah.
And
Okay. So actually, I had a pretty good story to share here. Is that like I remember it was like 2020. So October 2020 was like national game. Um, it was actually it was the national game. I didn't. So one of my athletes, LiJun, so he ruptured his right triceps tendon, so distal tendon,
oh,
right there during the clean and jerk,
Oh,
and
damn.
then so it was like October, but like I remember April next year would be the Olympic qualification. So yeah, whether or not you're going to Olympics, it depends on that one. So only 5 months left. So everyone was like, he's not going. He's not going to Tokyo. And I didn't know what to say when I heard that news, because I was actually watching the competition. And so from end of October, beginning of November, we started the training camp. And one my main job would be like rehab for him. So if you think about rehab, you'll be thinking, okay, this is a job of therapist. So not a coach's job. The coach's job is training, but like that was actually the perfect opportunity for me because at the time I was on one side I was pretty nervous because I don't know if we would succeed, and on the other I was really excited because I couldn't say okay how long it's gonna take for him to come back to the top, but I deep down I know we can do this. So I had this mentality is like if not me then who, if not now then now then when. So it's like if you don't think this way you'll be like you wouldn't be able to start the journey. So I just told him and just comfort him. I'm like just be patient and just step by step focus on today. So actually we spent like 5 months and then he got qualified, and then you guys know the rest of the story. He won the gold medal in
wow.
Tokyo. So
Yeah.
he clean and jerk 187 kilo. So it actually was something that I always I always believed and I always knew deep down inside, because my coaching philosophy would be there is actually a big misunderstanding, or like there is actually a big gap between the coach. Let's not say strength and conditioning coach because it's like more of a modern term. So traditionally, it's just strength coach and manual therapist, be it
Mm.
chiropractor, osteopath, physiotherapy, doesn't matter. So they'll be like, okay, some of the strength coaches started like what therapists recommend, and vice versa. So you know that that opportunity was like, okay, I'm just showing we can do the same thing as a coach. We don't, I didn't touch him. I didn't do any kind of manual therapy on him. Of course, he had the therapist, but like we work together. don't get me wrong, the therapists are pretty good. I had a friend who worked with me as well. So like he is actually a chiropractor. But like what I'm saying here is that, from training, we could actually see the, significant improvement. And as he improves, like he's confident, just, you can tell that he's rebuilding his confidence, because, anyone's been through that injury in that time, would be frustrated, but like seeing his change, like his facial expression, and he's being more talkative as he is recovering. So I feel like, okay, halfway there, I'm like, yeah, we can do this. So if I had to say something about helping athletes, especially high performance athletes, is that you firstly you have to know them. Secondly, you have to know that what they need, because as a coach, sometimes we know what they need, but they probably don't agree. Sometimes the athletes themselves, they be like, no, I don't need this. They just don't like it, but they need that. And we have to be 100% sure that they're lacking of certain elements in their training program. So we use different strategies, to put that into their training program, so we can get them, like 1% better. So we can reap the great benefit from that. Yeah.
Well said.
Yeah. I think it's actually very, very interesting, especially the story, right? Like someone, it's not even like a niggle, it's not even like a small injury. They literally, torn, and the progression from a torn musculature structure going into essentially nationals, right? I think you were saying he was going to nationals, competed at nationals, went on to the Olympics. The qualifiers went on to the Olympics, actually winning the Olympics all in the span of like what, maybe a year and a half, I think.
That would be 5 months for the qualifier. So October to the Olympics will be June or July, right? So
yeah. So
6-7 months.
Yeah, so it's actually even less. It's less than 10 months. Double digits, less than double digits.
Yeah,
and I think it's quite phenomenal, because I do think that obviously the degree and the severity of the injury will obviously dictate the time of recovery. But I do think a lot of people also underestimate like the human body and the capability of it. Like if you actually just give it an opportunity to, recover and do its thing, and like you said, bridging that gap between, hey, we want to qualify, but we also want to rehab an injury. There's always going to be room to try to, like you said, right, change the program to make it work. Maybe the goals might be different, but then hey, he ended up qualifying. I think that's definitely going to be one of those wins. I think he might win more titles in the future, but I'm sure that's going to be one of those wins where he can probably be very proud of, and I believe yourself as well, because it's not just a normal Olympic prep. It's an Olympic prep where you're injured, and then you go from being injured to not knowing whether you can actually even make the team to winning the whole damn thing. And I think that's a pretty cool story. And I think it also actually shows quite a lot in your belief in your own, I guess, coaching philosophy and process, right? Yeah. Obviously, off the record, we talk a little bit about your passion, as obviously as a lifter yourself and as a coach. I mean, it obviously shows a lot, especially in the story in this instance. But you also did mention you obviously train a lot yourself, and sometimes when you train in the same environment as all these strong lifters, it's obviously quite hard. And I think most PTs, most personal trainers might be able to relate to this as well. It's like, hey, I'm going to train a client, but then they'll work in a gym, they train with the client, the client leaves, or the client goes away and do mobility, cardio, whatever, and then the trainer's like, oh, I've got 3 hours, I'm going to train now. And then all of a sudden the client comes back to the PT and say, hey, I forgot to ask you a question. But then as a PT, you're like, dude, like, I'm not on the clock. I'm not working now. I'm actually training. I think off the record, you actually brought up a really good point about passion versus professional life, right? It's kind of this whole PT client situation. Like the PT trains a client, hey, that's professional. And then a client goes away, the PT does his passion stuff, which is weight training. But then when a client comes in and say, like as a professional and someone who's a coach, it's like, do you respond to the person? Do you say, hey, go away, I'll talk to you next session, kind of thing, right? And obviously communication comes into play. But being obviously a coach yourself, working with such high level athletes, essentially literally Olympic winners, how do you juggle your passion for the sport and professional life? Because I know that in powerlifting, a lot of the great powerlifting coaches out there, they would have or might have been world-class lifters, but it somehow gets to a point where sometimes they will actually not compete for the sake of coaching more, if that makes sense, or like somehow they would do less in the sport in order to potentially grow bigger athletes. An example in the powerlifting world, I'm very naive, I'm not very well versed in the weightlifting world, but someone that rings a bell would definitely be someone like Bryce Lewis. Leo, obviously Bryce is the world champion and he is still very actively competing, but he also coaches a lot of good athletes. So Chen, like it's really a question directed to you, and maybe Leo, you can chime in too, because obviously you coach athletes as well. Like, how do you guys juggle passion and professional life? Because obviously there's going to be a point, like a cutoff point, where it's like, hey, I'm gonna actually stop focusing on training because there's these people that need more of my help. Like how do you figure that out?
Should I
Leo,
go
go
first?
first.
All right.
Yeah.
So yeah, to be honest, the reason why I started coaching, first place is because of course I somehow love the sport. I find that the development that I get is more mentally than physically, and I actually think that for me as a coach, it sort of like gives me the opportunity to work with different kind of people. Simply seeing them, be a better form of themselves and see them succeed, especially when they're competing, it somehow gives me a sense of fulfillment. Okay. But truth be told, I used to sort of like power lift just for pastime and probably as an act of catharsis. But yeah, I don't know, like sort of like fell in love with it, kept doing it, and I've been through like the good, the bad, the ugly, and I still do it. So I'm quite certain that I really love the sport, and that's the reason why I'm still on it. So yeah, when it comes to like regulating myself and my athlete, I do think that there should be a healthy amount of like balance, just like work-life balance. Sometimes like, of course, when it comes to motivation, it's a bit low, it's a bit high. It's sort of like inconsistent, really. And for me personally, okay, you can't really rely on motivation. But then again, I do think that it all boils down to you. The answer has always been inside you. I think it's more so of like looking at things from a perspective of like, are you motivated intrinsically, whereas you do things for yourself, or are you motivated to do it like extrinsically? Not that I say you shouldn't be motivated extrinsically at all, but you know, end of the day, I'm a big believer that when you try to do things, when you try to hone your craft, especially, I do think that you should be really in the long run, do it for yourself, understand and sort of like realign your the root of your purpose, why you did it in the first place, because like if you simply keep doing the things and you just keep doing it blindly, sometimes you might get lost, and that's when you really spiral down and you're like, oh crap, why am I still doing this? So yeah, that's my piece of sense for this topic. What about you, Chen?
Actually, I think you brought up a really, really good point, which, I like a few months ago, one of my friends asked me about why. So it just all comes down to why. Why are you doing what you're doing? So I think a lot of people, get lost in that. They'll be like, they just give the superficial response. So you'll be like, why are you doing this job? You'll be like, because it gives me money. It's not the deep reason. Yes, it does. It helps you to put the food on the table, but that's not the root reason. So if that's the right word. So I guess we have to ask ourselves why, because I guess during my whole development process, there are a lot of, I guess, role models out there that show, how much they care. I had to mention, that there's a coach called Christian Thibodeau. So, I found his work like a year or two ago. Actually, it's not like, I knew him a long time ago, but I read his articles on T Nation.
Yes,
long
good
time
old T
ago.
Nation.
Yeah. So, I read a lot of his articles, but like they all really, really good articles. I learned a lot from his articles. But like when I first, saw his Instagram live, or like, when I first had, watched his videos, I just this guy is so nice. He is a perfect example of how, a performance coach or a strength coach should be like. Just so humble and so kind. Like when I met Leo and the other guys were back in the curtain gym, like Leo and the other guy, both of them they're doing powerlifting. So the first impression to me was like, the stronger you are, the more humble you are, the more like the more kind you are. You just helping people. I remember there's one evening, like I was squatting and Leo was teaching some like beginners to squat. So
It's a shame, but mate.
moment that okay, yeah, that's the moment that I always remember, because I don't really I don't actually care like how much you squat or you bench, but as long as you're showing me that you care about other people and like the way you coach him, it just shows me you love the sport, you love coaching, helping people. That's the one of the most important thing that drove me into this profession. So in the beginning it was like, okay, I had this much knowledge, so I can help maybe the recreational lifters. But then as we keep developing and training ourselves, we get more experience, we can coach better and better, higher level athletes. And once after the Olympic terms, I just had always had time to think about things that people I've interact with. I'll be like, before that, I actually think I want to coach high level athletes. But now, I don't actually mind, because anyone who is coming to ask me something nicely, just shows me that okay, they believe in me or they trust me in the first place. Otherwise, you wouldn't ask someone you don't believe, right? So
100%.
Yeah, so coach like Louis Simmons and like as I mentioned, Christian Thibodeau and other coaches like there's so many of them, like Kelly started when I was first starting my journey, and great cooks that they all just good coaches, but more importantly they're there to help, right? Whenever you ask them, because sometimes I on Instagram I just randomly ask someone some questions, some of the if I say social media influencers, they have 1 million followers. Some of them just don't care, they won't bother to reply. But like some of them, they just reply to you, and you can tell they're not selling stuff, they're not selling products, but they care. They're like, okay, you don't understand this, I'll help you out, because that's the true spirit to being a coach. Okay, are you a coach or you're a salesman? Or if you're selling your products online, I don't care how many followers you have, because I just don't care. I'll actually unfollow you, because you're not making a difference. I from my perspective, if you don't care, then I don't care either.
I think end of the day, like, as a coach, essentially it's a service. And when it comes to service, it's closely tied to value. And end of the day, it's all about value, the quality of the things that you actually give, the standard of like service you actually provide for them. Yeah, Chen. I do think that recapping about like the athlete and coach sort of like synergy, I think both of it sort of like boils down to what is the why of each individual, and um, I do think that I can say this with absolute certainty that when it comes to any kind of success, coach athlete relationship, I do think that both should somehow share the same vision, mission, and they should
Mm-hmm.
sort of like collaborate together because end of the day, on the big screen, on the platform itself, it might be just portrayed as an individual sport, but then behind the scene, it's actually a collaborative effort, everyone in unity trying to actually
Yeah.
actualize the real performance of an athlete. But yeah, Chen, I learned so much from just like, chatting with you, discussing with you. So yeah, man, it's been
Thanks.
awesome.
Sorry. So I, since Louis Simmons passed away, I watched some of the videos about people who knew him. I'd be like, he would, talk to someone on the phone for like 30 minutes, and he didn't even know that guy because the guy
Oh
was
yeah,
just
I saw that video before. Yeah. I do
yeah.
recall that.
So
Yeah.
What a
he
legend,
he
eh?
would just help. Yeah, he would just help them for free because they're like, who are them? Who is the person? He's like, I don't know, but he wants to get stronger, and that's a gold moment. I'll be like, okay, this is the true gold moment. Like that's the true role model for strength coaches. Okay,
Yeah.
you learn something from him. He got a lot of stuff. Like he got his knowledge conjugate system. Like none of that is the most attractive thing to me, but that behavior, the mindset, helping people to get stronger. That's one of the most important factors I think for the coaches. Be
Yeah.
it strength coach, conditioning coach, therapist, regardless of your profession, if you are dealing with people, and that's the role model. That's the thing that we should learn from.
But by the way,
Yeah.
just before we sort of like end the discussion, there's actually some questions that I've received from like the Instagram questions, there's actually around, I can't count, hey, like around 8 or 9, but I'll just pick one question, okay? This question is
True.
from Neil.Patel. Hope I don't butcher the name, but the question is, have there been any advances in training technology that look promising for weightlifting or readiness training? If you want to answer that, Chin.
As far as I'm aware, don't think so. Because I think, like personally, when it comes to coaching, I'm not like a tech-oriented guy because there are so many new technologies. So nowadays, you got push or gym aware or like normal tech, push and gym aware for like velocity-based training, that kind of stuff. And you have like different new technologies around recovery. So people are always, think, okay, they have this kind of recovery equipment, so it helps them to recover better. I don't think that's the case personally. Like if you ask me, get a good 8 hours sleep, view
The
morning
basics.
sunlight, yeah, hydrate, also, actually we have talked about this, stress management. So if you have, some kind of conflict with your family, your spouse, your girlfriend, boyfriend, it's gonna affect you big time. Okay, it's not because your body doesn't differentiate between psychological stress and physical stress. Okay? It doesn't matter. So it's the same thing. So I think we just people always think about technology is going to change everything. I don't believe that. I don't. Call me old school.
We're trying to find a magic pill, man.
Yeah, there's only that much technology that can help with dealing with stress. In the end, and a very fitting way to, I guess, sum up this episode is that stress is ultimately going to be inside your head, and funnily enough, make sure that if you're stressed as an athlete, as Chen sort of brought up in the podcast, is communicate it to your coach. Let them
Yeah.
know you're stressed. Programs can change, modalities can change, but just making sure you're open to the idea of letting them know that you're going through something in your life so that you can still make progress. And obviously, hopefully, if you're being coached by Chen, win the gold in the Olympics. That's probably the epitome.
Thanks.
I second that.
Well, I guess
Okay.
on that note, guys, I think we'll look to end this episode here. I think huge thanks to Chen for obviously coming onto the episode, and of course Leo as well. Where can people find you, Chen and Leo? I guess because technically both of you are actually first time guests on the podcast. So both of you, fire away your Instagram. I'll make sure to pop that in the description at some point.
Yeah, Leo first.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So my Instagram is Leo_Corpse Magna.
Yeah. So mine is less is more .Chen on Instagram. So like me and Leo will follow each other. And also, thank you guys for having me. It's a pleasure, and hopefully we can have share more stuff in the future. Because
100%.
I'll
Yeah.
post stuff on Instagram, and if you have any questions, you can ask me.
Yeah,
That would be nice. Appreciate you, Chen.
No worries,
Thank you,
guys.
guys.
Thanks. Thank you. And
Thank you.
if you like this episode, like, share. I don't know when we'll do another episode of Back to Square One, but I'm sure at some point we'll get back to the regular schedule once Kedric actually graduates his PhD. So stay tuned for that. Until the next one, guys. We'll catch you soon.